Hello, it's Mark with another episode of Big Man in the Woods, and it's my pleasure speaking today with a well-known outdoors lover, bushcraft instructor, and many other interests, Mr. John Rhyder.
Big Man in the Woods, Big Man in the Woods, Big Man in the Woods, and here's your host, Mark Yates.
John's both founder and head instructor of Woodcraft School. He was appointed chief instructor for Ray Mears, receiving his antler handle instructor knife, unusually only after one season. Prior to his teaching career, John worked in conservation management, traditional woodland skills, and management practices. He holds formal teaching qualifications and has been studying in outdoor education and natural history since 1994, mainly in bushcraft from 97. And he's been one of the lucky ones to make a full-time career out of this subject. He's featured on television, national and local newspapers, and brought in as an expert on radio programs. He's especially interested in wildlife, plants, trees, and fungi. John has been lucky enough to travel around the world, such as places to Norway, Sweden, France, and Poland. In this interview, I'm going to be asking John many questions, such as why does he love the outdoors, 3 tips to success for staying safe in the woods, and mainly what does he do when he's not in the woods. So I'm really excited that he's agreed to speak to me today. So I think you should grab a bit of a pen and paper, and you're going to learn loads of information in this lovely interview. So, John, hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Great little program on Channel 4 the other day everyone's been chatting about.
Oh, the one with Johnny Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a bit mad, not something I've ever done before. So I hope it came across all right. But it wasn't live, but it's filmed as if it's live, so you don't get a chance to go over anything if you make a huge sort of fool.
Oh no, I didn't. You didn't make a fool. You were quite good.
Well, it was a bit of a big ask. I think the premise they had was that Johnny Vegas is really into ceramics, and I think that's what he did his degree in. And I think they'd had him on there before, and he had them doing pottery. And the premise was that they would get their own back by doing some basketry, but I don't think they left enough time really for it.
No, it was
rushed and
it was
very difficult, complex sort of thing to do. Weave anything, I guess, in just 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think it came across well there.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you.
John, I was with Paul Curtley at the weekend, and we were discussing the word bushcraft and how it's been kind of bantered around and kind of used and abused and stuff. What's your take on the word bushcraft? What does it mean to you then?
It means to me, really. I think I might have even said that on the program you just referred to. I think it's an indigenous skill set, really, but it's based around a knowledge of natural history. So, for me, I see it very much as a natural history subject. It's just a hands-on kind of practical one, and I guess first and foremost, because that's where my interest started anyway, and that's where it broadly still is. I'd classify myself as a naturalist first, who, just happens to go outside and do knows a few campcraft skills and cooking and firelighting and all that sort of thing. But that perception, I guess, is when most people see the sort of end of the subject, whereas to me, and I think maybe Paul's the same, it's a vehicle that gets you out there for all sorts of other reasons. Yeah,
so it's not just sitting around a campfire with your mates having a few beers, like
well, it can be that, but I think the fire, water, shelter aspect of it, which is for most people where it seems to sort of start and stop, is really just, as I say, it's a vehicle to get you out there for all sorts of reasons. I mean, for me, it's interesting wildlife and natural history. For others, it might be climbing or canoeing, but it's a real start to the skill set as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's fly back many years. You left school and got your bits and pieces and grades. How did you get into the outdoor scene then?
I think I was always into it. If I go back far enough, without trying to create some kind of mythical grandfather figure, I was lucky enough to be taken out at quite a young age by uncles and who were keen bird watchers, fishermen. One had been a bit of a poacher actually, and knew an awful lot about wildlife. And I think that's really what sparked the interest. And then I guess like anybody, you want to kind of spend a little bit more time out there. You start camping and trying to light fires and cook dodgy sausages over a campfire, and try and get some way of doing that a little bit more sort of consistently and effectively, I guess.
Sounds good.
So it's been for as long as I can remember, really.
So have you mastered the art of cooking sausages then?
Oh, just about, I think, yeah.
I've seen there's some photos going around where people have put sausages on a garden rake and then cook that over open fire. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, we when I worked in the woods, we used to do a lot of that stuff over on shovels as well. And I knew an old boy who'd had a charcoal kiln. And he welded a horseshoe onto the lid of it, and he used to, just before he shut it down in the morning, or just after he shut it down, right, it's still a little bit hot. He used to fry an egg in there and have his breakfast. So
nice.
All these things are possible if you're a bit inventive.
Sounds good plan. Yeah. So, what do you really like about the outdoors then?
That's a hard one, because I think when it becomes sort of so much part of your life and your lifestyle, it's difficult to separate it. And again, going back to your sort of definition of bushcraft, I think for me that's what I try and encourage with people and for myself is making it all part of your daily life. So I'm pretty much like a lot of my students. I go for a walk with the dogs and come back with some fungi or some plants or whatever it might be, and so does my wife and the family as well. So I think it's difficult to say what I like so much about it, because I find it difficult to think of life without it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's true. So, you're lucky enough to have the woods and walk your dogs and stuff, but here in London, don't really have that chance. So what kind of tips would you be able to give me then in kind of urban London to get out and about? Well,
I did a wild field day for somebody I think it was in Richmond Park. So I think, it's possible. And again, if you have that attitude of making it part of your daily life, I think there are always places where you'll find nature. Obviously, it's going to be harder to look for in real urbanised places, but I think it still exists. Rather than sort of thinking to yourself, well, I can't possibly be practicing the subject because I need to go on an expedition somewhere. I need to make a huge effort to get out of town. I definitely think it's possible.
Yeah, we've got places, as you said, Richmond Park's not that far, Hyde Park, all that kind of. So there are parks around.
And Bushy Park as well. I mean, you can watch the red deer in these places, can't you? And I've got a whole collection of red deer footprints and tracks and signs just from the Royal Parks, because we don't have red deer in my way.
Well, there you go. So you've told us what you like about the outdoors. What don't you like about the outdoors then? There must be something that you don't like.
Yeah, I think there is. I think you can look at the whole thing with rose tinted glasses, but if I was being honest, wind I don't like. After several days of wind, it starts to get on my nerves, gives me earache, and I think part of it is from the sort of professional angle as well. You never sleep quite soundly in the woods if you've got students out there and the wind's blowing and trees are moving around too much. So, I'd say wind is probably the worst thing. I
was trying to predict your answer then, but wind wasn't going to be the answer that I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah, it does get on my nerves a little bit, I have to admit.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's something that I would seriously never thought you would have said then. Oh.
Really? What were you thinking I would say?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe like people leaving litter, no trace kind of thing, that kind of annoying litter. That's what I was thinking I was going to say.
No, I mean, that is irritating. It is irritating, but just personally, if it was just myself and nature, that's the one thing about nature that I find a bit annoying.
Yeah, no, that's true. So you're one of the lucky ones, John. That your school is really popular, and we were talking about earlier on that you've been on telly and newspapers and stuff. So what do you think has made you succeed in a field where people are kind of struggling?
I don't know. I mean, that's another difficult one to sort of quantify. I mean, I know what I'd like to think is that you try and do a good service, and you try and learn things to the best of your ability, and then think really thoroughly about passing them on to people. And hopefully, if you do that well enough, then people will keep coming back and recommending you to their friends. I mean, I do spend an awful lot of time practicing these things and learning about them. So I'd like to think that kind of shows through. And I also think, after I think some of it can come with experience. I think after a few years, in the industry, you sort of get to think what people might want, and it makes you a little bit more innovative when you're thinking of new ideas and new courses. Well, at least I hope so.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you just mentioned new courses. What's a new course for the Woodcraft School then?
We've had a few this year. We've got another long-term program which is based around plant identification and uses, sort of an ethnobotanical type of use, but it is very practical. So it's very much divided between 50-50 really, if I do implants and trees and fungi and then experiment a little bit with their uses. But it's not a sort of traditional carving type thing, because I think there are lots of courses out there that are like that. It's much more to do with foods and medicines and dyes and playing about with bark and all those sort of less common things, if you like. Which seems to be well received. In fact, it's full. It doesn't start till April, which is quite nice.
Oh, excellent.
And we've also got a new sort of bird-based course, which is based on bird song and their tracks and sign and scat and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a tracking course, but it's got a twist on it, just solely about birds. And I've teamed it with a friend of mine who's a brilliant birder and great with bird song, a lot better than me, in fact. So hopefully that will make an interesting course.
We're talking about birds as in flying birds, not as in birds as in good-looking ladies.
No, as in flying birds. Definitely. It's all part of the whole cyber tracker system that you may have come across. That it's sort of taught very much in that style, as it were. Although cyber tracker isn't a way of teaching; it's just a way of assessing. So it's more used in the way that they look at tracks and sign and the detail they pull out of them, which is was quite a shock to me really when I first got involved in that system.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the most popular course or a popular course with the Woodcraft School?
Well, currently that's no botany course, I think, because it's full so quickly. Our year-long course is always popular, as are the sort of shorter. I do an advanced award, which is an 8-day one.
Yeah.
And that's always very popular with people.
Okay, that sounds nice little few courses like that. So a question I've been asked earlier on was to ask you 3 tips for success for staying safe in the woods. In terms of? You're going away for the weekend, and kind of 3 really important tips that people should kind of follow for being safe.
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of safety, I mean, I think also, well, going back a step from there, I think maybe, if you're going out in lowland Britain, you're not in a huge sort of danger that you might perceive you are, and I think you can quite easily end up having some kind of massive survival fantasy, and you're just 5 minutes away from a major road.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you're going somewhere more remote, I would say take adequate equipment and kit that you need and know how to use it for that environment, and obviously tell somebody where you've been or where you're going, because I think a lot of these emergencies, if you like, or situations can be avoided if people just do some nuts and bolts outdoor skills like that. And then if you are going to use any skills or rely on them, just practice them till you're confident that you can make them work.
And even to practice like in your back garden, that kind of tip, is that what?
I think just practice relentlessly if you want to. None of these skills are particularly mysterious, I don't think. I think you just need to drill them and not just pay them lip service. If you do want to be good at anything, whether it's rubbing sticks together, there's no mystery to it. It's just practicing it.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And you could practice that arguably almost anywhere.
That's true.
There's a smoke alarm anyway.
So, do you think that the bow draw is like a party trick? That's a question that we kind of ask most people. Is it a party trick?
It goes beyond that, I think. I mean, in some ways, you could argue that it's not a valid outdoor skill because you wouldn't rely on it. But I think there's something more important there. So fundamentally, in people's heads, it's a milestone. I think when you get competent at that, it becomes a little tick in the box in some ways that you're on the road to learning these skills. And I think there's also a lot to be learned about trees and timber and recognising them in the dead state and being able to use tools to create that, and also that connection to the past. And I think there's a lot to be said from that. And I think it's all too easy in this subject for people to take out all the hard stuff because they can't do it or they can't be bothered to practice it.
Yeah.
And then what's left? And then we'll all just be dropping sparks onto bits of cotton wool soaked in Vaseline if we did that and calling it bushcraft. Or using skateboard wheels instead of bearing blocks.
You caught me out then.
Don't do that, do you, Mark, surely?
Not skateboard wheels, no. So, something that I'm always asked is advice for someone who's just starting out. So they just kind of discovered the whole camping, survival, bushcraft kind of scene.
Yeah.
What would kind of your advice be? Read books, YouTube videos, take courses, that kind of stuff?
I personally think that because my belief in the subject being a natural history study, and watching people over the years, and the many people I've taught, that's the bit where they fall down. It's that understanding nature. I think the principles of not being cold, not being hot, purifying water, all those sorts of things are relatively quickly learned. I mean, to me anyway, where the depth of knowledge is that interpretation of what's out there in the natural world. And I think, if you can identify things, either by going through courses that specifically teach that, or just studying as much as you can, it's a lot easier then to hang a use on something. You can have a million uses for, say, I don't know, an oak tree, but if you can't actually identify that oak tree, then those uses are a little bit superficial, aren't they? Whereas if you start the other way and ID things, hanging uses and things onto them is much easier.
Yeah. So more of a knowledge than kit. Go the knowledge way.
Definitely. I mean, that's where it all came from, I think, isn't it? And whether you take a sort of prim tech approach, or even if you read people like Nesmuk and Kephart, there are all these guys that couldn't afford to be taken outdoors by effectively safari companies in those days, and they just had to get their own kit and their own knowledge so they could get out there. But again, they were probably only doing it as a vehicle. It was a means to an end, wasn't it? Because I think most of them were out there hunting and doing things like that. And the campcraft and the putting up of tents and all that sort of stuff was just a way of getting them out there so they could do that.
Yeah. That's true.
And I think you're right. I think it has got lost very much in kit. Unfortunately, the subject.
Yeah, that's what happened. When I done a recent course with the Frontier Bushcraft guys, there was that famous kind of kit boy that was there, and he had every single knife that you can think of, and and he couldn't, not be nasty or anything, but he really didn't know anything, But he had all the kit, and he was very pleased to show off his knife and stuff. But come looking for some bark, silver birch or whatever, I had no idea. So yeah, I can agree with you about the learning the knowledge and back to basics kind of stuff, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. I think you need very little to get out there and learn the skills. And most of us have been in it for a long time, started with very little kit anyway. Yeah. And to be honest, I can't remember the last time I bought anything that you would specifically call a bushcraft piece of kit. I don't think you need to keep collecting it.
Yeah, once you've got it, isn't it? That's it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I first started with woodlaw, Ray and I used to spend ages in places like Wilkinson looking for coffee cans, that you could make billy cans out of, and that all got superseded by things like zebra pots, and everybody had to have one of those, and it kind of, it takes a little bit of the joy out of it, doesn't it, when you're foraging through through Amazon rather than foraging through sort of local car boot sales and sort of pound shops to see what you can improvise.
You haven't seen my kit then. Mine's all second-hand military stuff. Collecting all the tins that the wife throws out in the kitchen. Oh, that'll be useful in a minute. And you get camping and everyone's got their, shiny, as you said, zebra tins, and I pull out, old baked bean tin. This will do for me.
Brilliant.
My £10 Moira clipper knife does the job,
exactly.
Isn't it?
It's all you need, isn't it? I mean, I think it's nice in some ways if you're really serious to have quality tools, particularly if you're going to do a lot of carving. But I think it shouldn't stop you going out there. And I hate to think that people have been stopped going in the outdoors because they don't feel they can afford the kit, which I think is possible, unfortunately.
I think that's the way at the present moment. My feeling, and just seeing on stuff online, it is a real kit at the moment. That's what it is. Who's got the best bag, who's got the best jacket and all that kind of stuff, and you think, well, that's not what it's all about, really, isn't it?
No, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So, John, let's can we ask some personal questions now? Let's leave the camping stuff to one side. Yeah. So, how do you relax?
Me, I'm a big fan of movies, actually.
Okay, what are you watching at the moment?
What did I just watch? I watched one with my son the other night. Divergence, I think, was the last one we watched.
Okay.
Whether you saw that, it's a sort of I think it's very much in the same genre as Hunger Games, where there's a all controlling government. But I like to escape into fantasy that way. To be honest, I think it's a great way of relaxing. I don't necessarily watch really highbrow films because I don't, in those sorts of scenarios, I like to not have to think too hard, to be quite honest. Whereas my wife's quite into continental films with subtitles. I can't concentrate long enough, I'm afraid, to read them and find out what's going on.
So, kind of spare time, movies and family. I guess you're a big family man, yeah?
Yeah, and watching my son play football is also a great joy. He's quite good at it, and he's always entertaining. So that's usually Sunday mornings if I'm not at work.
Are you one of the dads on the sideline cheering and shouting at the referee?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're actually quite good at as a support network. We're actually quite polite, I think. But you do see a few sights when when families do get a little bit upset with the referee's decision.
And you've got high first aid skills. So have you ever used them in the football scene?
No, I haven't. Not in that scenario. I did. We went on holiday to Transylvania a couple of years ago, and we stayed at a place with an unheated swimming pool, and one of the local kids in there got hypothermic. We had to drag him out quite quick, and he went blue and shivery and just went under the water, in fact. So we had to sort him out a little bit, but that wasn't too serious. Touch wood, I've never had any really major things to deal with.
No, that's a good point. And just going, touching on the first aid thing, do you think people should do a first aid course before heading out into the woods, just in case?
I think people should just do them anyway. I think they should be taught in schools.
No, I agree.
I think it's just life-saving stuff, isn't it? That early intervention.
It is.
It's ridiculous that we don't, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm well and truly behind. I was in St John's Ambulance since the age of 5, so kind of that whole scene has always been with me for life. And I don't understand anybody that doesn't know just the basics. Just basic life support, bleeding, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame. Yeah. So, silly question. Let's throw a stupid question in there. If you were Prime Minister for the day, what was the first thing you'd do?
Well, I think I probably would have worn that shit T-shirt that he didn't wear. I think you made a bit of a mistake there, don't you? Other than that, I think I'd probably stop paying lip service to all these environmental issues that you keep reading about. It's about whether bees are dying and we're scraping up the seabed and destroying the entire reef, just to get a few scallops. I think the environment is going to bite us in the backside if we're not very, very careful with it.
I think that's the way it's going, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mother Nature's going to get her own back on us.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
It's a shame, but I do think it needs sorting out. But whether that would happen on a sort of government level or whether it needs to be at world level and whether people will put that before making profit is another thing, I guess, isn't it?
That's
sadly.
True. Yeah. So how can we help Mother Nature then? Just in our back garden, what would you recommend us to do?
Well, I think part of what I'm involved in, obviously, education is great. If people don't know about stuff, and that's why I think, again, bushcraft is such a great medium for that, because I think it's very easy to put walls up and wall areas off, and if people aren't allowed in somewhere because it's special, then they lose interest, because it's sort of, if I'm not interacting with it, why should I care about it? Whereas I think if you can bring them into nature in whatever way and show them all this sort of cool stuff, I guess, that we're interested in, then hopefully they'll have more of an interest in the whole picture and want to look after it. But there's also, in your own back garden, there's always scope for leaving wild areas, whether intentionally or managed. As I could have that argument with my wife again about the nettle patch, whether it's a conservation thing or whether it's a
can't be bothered.
Be lazy. But ponds in gardens are great. We've got a big area out of our garden with a pond in the middle of it, and then there's going to be a wildflower meadow. We've planted some trees, and they can be only small trees. They can be fruit. They can be hazelnuts. They can be, things that are going to be useful to you as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's certainly important to leave a little space for it. And there's loads of ideas out there. The RSPB are brilliant with their information.
Yeah, I was watching something on YouTube.
And all that sort of thing.
YouTube, they were suggesting. I think it was actually the London Wildlife Trust, just talking about getting a little pond in your garden, and they're just suggesting getting a washing up bowl, something as tiny as that, putting in a bit of muck and dirt. And just burying it in your garden, and that's you got a mini pond that way.
And well, it's so important, isn't it? Because I think so many of the traditional farm ponds have been filled in over the years, and I know people of my age, we used to spend hours in those sorts of places catching newts and frogs and what have you, and I go back to where I was brought up, and none of those exist anymore. It's really sad.
It is a shame.
They've all just been filled in and ploughed over.
Yeah. So talking about as kids, then, how do you encourage well, how should we encourage our children to get outdoors then? Because, you know, they've got YouTube, they've got games, they've got Facebook. Why should they go outside?
It's always difficult, isn't it? It's the same sort of problem as a parent myself in some ways, believe it or not. But I think you have to make it exciting, and I think it's difficult with most kids unless they're very, very keen on nature to be walked through and have a list of things pointed out to them. You've got to make it fun. You've got to turn it into a game and make it very exciting for them. And I think even if they pull away from that in later life, they'll come back to it, or at least they'll retain an appreciation of it if you start early enough.
Yeah, and you know, me as a scout leader, so that's another way we get our kids out and about.
Well, exactly, and that's fun as well, isn't it? Because again, there's a lot of games and things been played in scouts.
Yeah, and we kind of, I wouldn't say not follow health and safety guidelines as such, but, you know, we can do quite a few things that you won't be able to do in schools, you know, kind of like axe and knife work.
Yeah.
And just letting them run around in the woods, that's one of our biggest things, you know, because the kids even tell us that their life is so structured during the week. You know, they've got to get up at a certain time, go to school, and when they go to school, everything's structured that way.
Yeah.
And when they go camping with us, they're kind of like, what do we do next? You know, it's just time to run around and just have fun, you know.
Exactly, and I think you can wrap up the educational message scouting and all of those sorts of fun activities.
Yeah,
and I agree. I mean, I think most kids have probably had enough of it by the time they get home from school, haven't they? And they want it to be a little bit less formalised, as it were.
Yeah, no, it's true. So just getting out and about, making any excuse you can to get outside.
Yeah, I think so, and I think I know from my son, you know, it's ridiculous how. In some ways, the way we do educate people, because you've got a pre-teenage kid who's got sort of testosterone coursing through them, and you're saying sit still for 8 hours while we talk to you.
Yeah,
it just goes against human nature, doesn't it? In many ways.
That's true. I can't remember what there's a country. I forgot off the top of my head, but they do lots of outdoor classes just for that reason, you know.
Well, I think with the popularity of the forest school movement, which seems to get genuine results, doesn't it? With people aren't necessarily tuned into school, I think it proves it.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of environment, and I guess it's the environment we evolved in.
Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because anything out of the ordinary, it's just so difficult to organise, or at least it's expensive to organise, isn't it? Anything out of the mainstream is always going to be hard when the system's geared up to work in a certain way. And
that's true, but, you know, from a parent point of view, it's easier just to stick your kid in front of the telly, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, I suppose. We're quite lucky like that, I think, because we've always kind of had an angle on it. My son's not so bothered. He will sit in front of games if you don't stop him, but generally if there's something else going on, especially football, because that's his obsession at the moment, you know, then he'd rather do that. But yeah, I think again, once youngsters get into that mindset of always watching the screen, then it's very difficult to break them out of it.
Yeah, and you know, in London, bringing up a kid in concrete jungle, there's not much parks around, and you know, all they've got to do is walk the streets. It's a difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult problem, and that's where organisations like the Scouts come in, I think.
Yeah, Scouts, the guides.
It's offering that alternative, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Just trying to get kids out and about and break the normal routine. Yeah.
Yeah.
David wants me to ask you, by the way, when are you taking Johnny Vegas out to the woods?
I don't know. Nice though. He was really into it. I think because he's a craftsman. I know he's won awards for his ceramics. And during that program, while they were interviewing the other guest, Johnny Vegas was really keen on that. He tried to finish it off, and I was coaching him in the kitchen area because he was really determined and focused on it. So I don't know. He said he had a love of all of those things, but I don't know whether he'd want to take it any further.
Why don't you drop him a line?
Yeah, it's a thought, isn't it?
You never know.
Stalking him.
So, Ray Mears, any contact with him at all?
I haven't spoken to Ray for a long, long time. No, not for years and years.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
What do you think about his latest series then?
I only saw one of them. Is the Wild Walks ones?
Yes.
Again, I think they're. I like the concept of all of that, because hopefully with somebody of Ray's influence, you know, you can perhaps bring some of the natural history back into the subject, which, as we were talking earlier, may have got sort of sidetracked slightly. So I think anything where you see a figure that's well known for the subject moving into natural history is always going to be good, as far as I'm concerned. But then I'm a bit biased because that's my first love anyway.
You're not one of those boring dads, are you? When you take your kids out, oh, look at this plant, look at this, look at this, look at this.
I've been accused of that. In fact, I think last year when we were thinking about holidays, my son said, "What did he say? No offence, Dad, but can we go to a hotel this time, not in a forest looking at poo?" I think maybe he's had it rammed down his neck too much.
And what does your wife think of it all then?
She's very keen, actually. But I met her on a course that I was teaching at Woodlaw, and she's very good with fungi, and she's not so bothered about the more sort of unpleasant aspects of it, I guess, like the drop-ins. I think there's a video on my website where I talk about that, because when we were on our honeymoon, I managed to find a wolf scat, and I dried it on the radiator of the apartment during our honeymoon, which probably isn't the most romantic thing to do, but at least I've got that in my collection now.
Out of interest, who films your videos? Because I was watching them the other day, and they're really good quality, really good.
Yeah, they're good, especially as they're done on a relatively sort of budget for Woodlands TV, which is so they're done on like digital SLRs, and I think it's quite incredible the quality that they come up with.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. It's Colette Scott and Dan. I'm trying to remember the name of their company, but I can't remember. It is credited on there though.
Oh, excellent.
As the video company.
No, they are very good. So, just going back to Woodcraft School, have you got any really cool stories? Any funny stories that springs to mind about pupils that have done bizarre, odd things on your courses?
Oh, I probably could have done if I'd thought about it. There's always a few unusual things that happen. I do. I mean, it shouldn't really laugh in a way, because some of it is the not known. But I did have a student. We were talking about owl pellets, and was quite surprised to sort of find out that owls also had bottoms as well. He thought everything came up through the front end, which I think was quite amusing at the time. But
oh dear.
But we tend to have a lot of sort of banter on the courses anyway. I think there's always something happening.
What kind of people attend the school then?
Well, I teach mostly adults, and as you probably know, a lot of the stuff that I do is accredited. So I do get people that are interested in passing the skills on. But generally, I think because of our emphasis on the natural history side of it, we get a lot of people that are really into that sort of thing. So I'm quite lucky in that I don't have to necessarily wade myself through that huge sort of machete carrying mentality. Whereas in the early days, we did used to get people, turning up looking like mutant Ninja Turtles with sort of all sorts of sharp swords and things strapped to the back, so it seemed that way. So a whole range of people. It's predominantly men, unfortunately, which I think is really sad. I really think there should be more women in the subject, because I think unfortunately it's perceived as being very macho and male dominated, and it really shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see more females on there. Some courses we do get sort of half and half, and then some we get more women than men. But I think I'd like to see more across the board of spread out between the sexes.
Yeah.
But yeah, whole range of people, really.
Oh, that's good. And people kind of not doing the whole kind of bushcrafty camping stuff. You want, basket weaving and back to nature bark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, I think the expedition skills and living outdoors. I think if you come on an outdoor living course, then you should outdoor live. Obviously, it makes no sense to then go home. But I think if you just come up to make a longbow, then there's no. I don't insist people stay out.
Yeah.
If they're on a course like that, I'd only really say that they'd have to do it if they were, in that sort of course where they're learning those skills, or the year-long course that I do where people want to pass those skills on themselves. I think you have to have sort of done it really before you can talk to other people about what it's like. So no, and I think any sort of chance that people can grab to get out there, and if they don't like camping, then fair enough. I certainly wouldn't insist on that.
Yeah, that's true. Last question. What luxury do you always take with you into the woods?
Luxury?
Yeah.
I'd say probably things that are heavy that you don't necessarily need. Binoculars, I would say, definitely.
Okay.
I couldn't especially when you get older and your eyesight's not as good as it used to be. I rely on those quite heavily. But I think they're great, and if you get a reasonably decent pair, they're because their job is to gather light.
That's great.
They even help slightly at dusk as well when the vision is really not as sharp as it should be. When you're switching over from your rods to your cones.
That's true. Yeah. Well, John, thank you very much.
No worries.
I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there just because of time-wise. But thanks for sharing all those insights and tips, and it's been great.
All right, no problem.
How can people get hold of you?
Probably through the website. It's the easiest thing. It's just woodcraftschool.co.uk.
Excellent. I've checked that website out. It's great. And like I was talking about earlier on about your videos on your website are amazing.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was pleased with the way they came out.
Excellent. Well, John, once again, thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
Excellent. Cool.